So, in this episode, we're going to be discussing stage yellow. Stage yellow is the seventh stage in the consciousness model called spiral dynamics. It is individual focused, and it's the first stage within what's called the second tier. So first of all, the first tier is all of the stages we've discussed up until now. So that's beige through green. The first tier is defined by what is their survival focused. It's stages from green downward are all about self-preservation. Either they survive as an individual or they survive as a community, and because of that, they can't see outside their own perspective. Um, so, for example, conservatives in blue, they're all about survival, making sure that their own culture survives. They can't see outside their own perspective. Um, and because of that, they're ethnocentric, oftentimes sexist, racist. And then orange, which is also about survival, but goes about it in a different way, where in orange, it's all about survival of the company, survival of the individual, the want to become as successful an individual as you can, and through that, as successful a company of your design as you can. It's all about, that, so it's still about survival, and Orange can't see outside its own perspective. So it doesn't understand the value of things like regulation or taking care of the environment or anything like that. And then for green, green is all about equality, fairness, celebration of culture, and it tends to deride anyone who doesn't look at the world that way. It derides orange for its selfishness, derides blue for its ignorance and hatred. But in so doing, green has a way of being ignorant and hateful in itself because it can't see outside of its own little world. Um, and as people are in green and they, try to make the world more livable, and they start to wonder, is there more to the way in which we could be doing things? Um, and there's a transformation that occurs then from a focus on survival to a focus on what's called being. And by being, I just mean um, uh, the the want to experience the universe, the want to explore reality, to figure out, what really is this place we're in, what is, and why do we think there even is an is, things like that. So the being tier is focused on just experiencing the magnificence of the universe. It's no longer about survival anymore. It's about development of the self and the world through both a knowledge and spiritual means, and I would assume there's even other means as we go up beyond yellow and turquoise. But we're talking about yellow right now because that's this episode. Um, and so the being tier, it's a radical shift in the focus of how people go about things, from the need to sustain yourself in your ideology to the exploration of yourself and ideology, and through that, trying to figure out, what is the universe, what am I, why am I conscious, what is consciousness, these kinds of questions. This is what tier 2 is focused on. And that's why it's called the being tier. With stage yellow, which is the first stage of the being tier, um, it's let's see, it's what causes green to move into stage yellow is that green, first of all, is overly communal, and it doesn't understand the the need for people to sometimes break out of the norm, to the the need the understanding that sometimes you actually need people who are far ahead of the curve, far ahead of the mean average, and that when people are that way, it's not always selfish. Sometimes it's simply because they really are that capable, and it could also be because the society actually needs people who are like that. And also, it's because everyone has some particular skill or set of skills that they can contribute to the world, whether they know it or not. And when that happens, oftentimes they will need to break out of the norm and go above the average in some aspect. At the same time, yellow emerges with the need for real action, because with green, it's all about protesting. It's all about, uh, you know, trying to get more democracy, be political, go doing political rallies, demonstrations, rebelling. And sometimes that works, but a lot of the time it really doesn't work, and it doesn't go anywhere, as we're seeing right now in today's world. And eventually green kind of gets tired of that way of doing things, and they want real action. And so they step back and they look at what they're doing. They're like, you know why isn't what we're doing working? Why aren't we getting our way? Maybe it's something about how people in the world are set up. Maybe there's something there that's sort of like standing in the way of what we actually want to accomplish. And when they look at that, um, they start to realize that the entire world is made out of systems in the definition that I have in that episode that I put out before the Spiral Dynamics series. What are systems? Go watch it if you want to know more. um, they see the world as made out of systems, which are survival. Let's see, how did that um, they're cultures that are made out of one particular survival strategy, which are adapted to whatever that particular situation is, and at the same time the people build ideologies around that. And so green, like for example, it looks at orange and it looks at the tech culture, company culture, libertarian culture that they have. And green starts to realize that a lot of the reason why people are in that particular bubble is because they're driven by a want for survival. And they begin to realize that that they can see that orange is like a lens of looking at the world through, that orange is a particular manner of going about things that people in orange go through because they believe they have to. And once green realizes that, it's not too long after that that they start to apply that to themselves, and they realize that green is also a similar bubble. And once they realize that their own ideology is a bubble, then they begin to realize, well, gosh, what are all these different bubbles that people live in? All these different system strategies. How many are there? Is there a pattern to them? Do people, is there some sort of progression chain? And these are exactly the sort of questions that Clare Graves faced uh, when he was just before he came up with the model Spiral Dynamics. He was started out as a New Age hippie, and while he was doing various projects in college, he came up with the idea of just interviewing people around the campus and just asking them, well, what is it you believe? How do you think the world works? Why do you think it works this way? And so he did that with hundreds of people, and he made lots of notes about their general ideologies, and he noticed that there tended to be these different bubbles that people believed in. Either they were all one bubble, or they were some combination of multiples that tended to be right next to each other on the chain. And he noticed that there was this progression up and down these different levels, and that it tended to be unidirectional. People would move one way along it much more frequently than they would move backward along it. And he noticed uh, these different ideologies that were in the same order that I've released these spiral dynamics episodes. You know, the purple, red, blue, green, orange, and so forth. I mean, on a college campus, there obviously wasn't any red or purple, but he noticed the blue and the orange definitely, and of course his own green. And he noticed that there was a sort of progression along it, and pretty soon he started moving beyond the campus and interviewing even more people. And he noticed that he learned about stage red, and then he developed spiral dynamics pretty soon after that. And eventually he started traveling the world with two other people who had joined him, um, Beck and Christopher Cowan. And they went to places in Africa, and let's see, there was a few other besides that. I don't think it was New Guinea that was one of them, but they went. Oh crap, I don't remember. But anyway, they went to various places to look at stage purple cultures. Africa was definitely a big one, but I know there were a few smaller other ones besides that. But anyway, moving on. He figured out how purple works after being in that part of the world for years, and he developed this sophisticated model, and he noticed that there are these patterns that not only was there a progression chain, but these stages tended to be built upon one another. Whatever level someone had would use the level below it as a foundation. For example, orange will very frequently use blue as a foundation. We have laws, therefore we can do stuff like business and tech, because now we're no longer afraid of criminals stealing all our shit because we got blue to protect us. Green will often use orange as a foundation because, the New Agers are frequently very affluent people, whether they want to admit this or not. And they often come from the business inventor side of things, and having realized the excesses of that. Um, and so green will often have a financial foundation that comes from stage orange. And the other stages work in this way. And when you realize this pattern, you realize it's sort of built up like a pyramid, where the lower stages are supporting the upper stages. And when someone moves up a stage, they don't really drop the stage that they leave. They keep all the useful stuff they need from it, but instead, they it's sort of like building the layers of an onion. They move up a layer, or moving up a level in a pyramid. They use everything that they have learned before as a base, so that they can develop new skills and new insight based upon new stages. And that's the reason for this progression that he noticed. It's a transcend and include kind of progression. And it also explained the reason for why blue was much more inclusive than green, and that green was much more inclusive than blue. That's a bad mistake. Green more inclusive than blue, and blue was more inclusive than purple. Orange was more inclusive than red. Um, and so forth, is because the way you work your way up the chain, you transcend whatever you're in, while including it at the same time, and then you build more stuff upon the foundation of what already exists. And this is when he really sort of nailed it, and is like, he had his profound insights, um, and realized, there's these different phases and stages that people move through. Often children will manifest beige, red, and purple. As they get older, they go into blue. As they get older than that, they go into orange and then green, and so forth. And at the time, he didn't really know that many yellow people because it was still very new in the world. It still is, actually, but a little bit more populous than it was then. But Graves, he was sort of like the pioneer of yellow, and he was like trying to figure out, I found this, I used this transcend and include thing on green, so now where am I? And so that's where he developed stage yellow, and also where he came up with the colors, because since all the stages are useful in some sense, since they're all a response to some situation, he decided it wasn't constructive to say that one is necessarily better than the others. I mean, it is generally true that the higher you go, the more peaceful and loving and stable a world there will be. But even still, living in a brutal world is a skill. And if you're living in a brutal world, for example, the red world, then in that situation, it's obvious that the most valuable stage will be red, because if you don't have red, then people are just going to kill you. And then all the profound loving insights you have from higher stages won't be worth anything. So it's situation based. It depends on where you are and what you're in, what situation. So instead of applying numbers to them, he gave them colors, and he did that just because no one really, they, they might have a favorite color, but no one can really say that any color is necessarily better than another color because it's just a color. And he thought it was a good metaphor, especially since people generally are not just one stage, they're multiple different stages. They have a preference, they got a favorite one, and then there's their second favorite one, and then their third favorite one. We'll remember this stuff from kindergarten. And he thought it was a good metaphor for how the stages work and how people choose stages. The reason why I use numbers is because I want people to understand that it really is on a continuum. And also, eventually, I'll be putting out my own two-dimensional version of the same model. It may be a bit before that, because after this episode, I'm going to take a hiatus from spiral dynamics to do some other things. I will come back eventually, of course, but it's just, I've been doing spiral dynamics a while, and there's other stuff I do want to talk about. But when I do come back to spiral dynamics at some point, I will definitely bring up my the two-dimensional version I developed, because I think that's pretty interesting. And when I do that, it definitely will be very useful for people to understand the continuum that exists in the one-dimensional normal model, just because it'll make things a lot more obvious for what I'm doing. So anyway, moving on. So what are the aspects of stage yellow? What is it that defines it and makes it separate from the stages below it? Well, first of all, as you probably gathered, uh, yellow is aware of what's called the spiral, or in other words, the spectrum of consciousness. By spiral, it just means there's the alternation between individual and collective, and also the transcend and include thing. So the way that Clare Graves envisioned it in his head was, you have the smaller stages, and then it spirals around, and then there's another layer of purple. It spirals around again, another layer of red, sort of like an onion or a shell. On the book he released, he made it look like a shell. But anyway, yeah, the point with yellow is it's aware that there is this spectrum of development, um, and it's aware that there are the other stages below it. Um, so it's aware of where it came from and why it came from it, and why all the other stuff on the spiral came from where it did as well. The next facet is knowledge. Yellow wants to gain as much knowledge about the world and existence and reality as it possibly can. They hoard knowledge. They want to learn everything, experience everything. If they don't know something, then they're going to do everything they possibly can to make sure they do know it. Um, in the same way that orange tries to hoard wealth and material possession, and red tries to hoard power, yellow is all about hoarding knowledge, hoarding insights and information. I need to get some water. I'll be back in a sec. So the next facet is what's called the triple win. So the triple win is yellow wants the world to work, and it wants everyone to be stable and happy in that world. So what it does is it uses what's called the triple win scenario. So the triple win is side A wins, side B wins, and at the same time, the system wins. An example would be, let's say there's some sort of tribal feud, and what yellow will do is, I want your perspective to win, and they're going to come up with a stable solution for the other side, and they're going to present this as being one unified solution. They're going to come up with, in other words, a certain system. So side A benefits from how the system works, side B benefits, and at the same time, everyone else benefits as well. The entire system, the ecosystem, benefits. So that's called the triple win scenario, and it's one way that you can characterize yellow and differentiate it from others, because others will not use triple win down in the first tier. It's only my perspective wins and there's no one else. Whereas with yellow, they'll try to set it up so that there's a win across the board. Everyone comes away happy. The next facet is functionality. So functionality is the desire for the world to work as well as it possibly can with itself. The desire to make everyone as effective as they can be, and in such a way that they benefit the system as much as they can, and that the system benefits them and that they benefit from the system as much as they can at the same time. So it's all about, I'd say, probably more toward practical. As Einstein once said, it should be as simple as it can be, but no simpler. So whereas Orange wanted everything to be ridiculously complicated, the way Orange does things is, whenever there's some problem, they add more interfaces, more stuff. They'll do programs to remove whatever nasty bug there is. But as soon as they introduce those programs, that creates more problems because they've made the system more complex. And when the system is more complex, that means there's more things that can go wrong. So there's other problems created from that thing they entered. And of course, the way Orange handles it is they introduce more stuff, and that makes it even more complicated. And so you have this cycle of problems created by solutions. The way that yellow fixes this is yellow is about everything should be practical and simple. Don't overthink the solution. You can overthink the way you're going about reality, make that as complicated as possible. But when you're actually trying to solve something in it, you don't want to overcomplicate the situation. It should actually work. It should be as usable as possible, as user friendly. It should be as accessible as possible so as many people can use it from as many different places in the world as they can. And it should work for everyone. There should be no problems from it. There should be no prioritization of one particular stage over another stage. Um, what's the maximum effectiveness of it? Is everyone benefiting from it in the way that they need to be benefiting? In other words, it's all about the thing. It needs to actually work. It's not about making money anymore. It's just the desire for making the thing um, be as effective as possible in as stable a way as possible and in as accessible a way as possible. And it should be as simple as it can be, but no simpler, so that it should be the it should, in other words, it should be only as complex as it needs to be to do the job in an effective way, and no more complex than that. So the next facet is models, and by models I just mean conceptual things like spiral dynamics, arrangements of various different stages or regions of something that's going on in the world, and an analysis of why there is that thing. Why does that thing happen? It doesn't just have to be about people and culture. It could just be like a physical system, and yellow will go about it in a different way, like chaos theory and dynamical systems. That's an example of a yellow area of physics. I'm not going to go too much into dynamical systems here, but it's sort of like chaos theory, the butterfly effect, strange attractors, that kind of stuff. Butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the world, causes a tornado somewhere else. That kind of thing. That's a stage yellow field, and it's not really directed at people. It's just sort of like physics being applied in a yellow way. So a model can be about absolutely anything, and spiral dynamics just happens to be a model that's done about people and culture, and it's one type of model. The next facet is exploration. So yellow wants to explore the world as much as it can. It wants to learn as much about the world and the universe as much as it can. The Star Trek series, the old version of Star Trek, not the new one. The new one's orange, but the old one, which was conceived by Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry was also in stage yellow, and he actually had some he did channeling for certain spiritual entities uh, that were like called the Nine or something, and from them he sort of gained insights about they sort of taught him stuff about how other species might be going about things in other places in the cosmos, and that's where he developed the idea for people going out into space to explore it, befriend other cultures, boldly go where no one else has before. uh, that kind of thing. That's a yellow idea that comes from stage yellow. And again, I'm not talking about the new stuff. The new modern stuff is orange nonsense. It's completely removed from the olden days, and it's nowhere near as meaningful. So I'm only referring to like the stuff in the 60s, like up until like the next generation, maybe Voyager, that kind of stuff. That's what I'm referring to as being yellow inspired. If it gets more recent than that, then that's where things start to fall apart. Um, just to be really clear on that. So, with yellow, they want to explore as much as they possibly can. Um, and, you know, they want to. Their progress is determined by the magnificence of reality. Let's see, how did Clare Graves put it? said, oh God, he said something like it should be driven, it should be driven, it, oh, I know, it's real, real insight is derived from the magnificence of reality. That's where yellow really gets its drive, or the magnificence of existence. That's where that's how yellow sort of like gets its fuel of just wonder, awe, imagination. This is how yellow works. The next facet is mind. So mind is, it's all about what you think. I think, therefore I am. Um, yellow has a very mental attitude towards it. It's about thought. It's about being stuck in your head. It's about meditation. It's about thinking about some problem for hours and hours on end, just focusing on nothing but the problem, uh, leaving everything else out. Um, and it's the mind is all there is. Sometimes it really feels like that when you're in stage yellow. The next facet is logic. So for logic, it's everything is derived based on pure reason. It's not rationality, not to be confused with orange, because orange often likes to champion logic, and the way that orange uses logic really isn't logic. It's something else. Because Orange just wants to rationalize everything away. If something's remotely spiritual or supernatural, Orange will just disregard it and say, that this thing can't be formalized in the existing establishment of science, so it just doesn't make sense. Whereas with Yellow, Yellow will actually look at the thing, and Yellow will really analyze it and try to they'll reason, they'll everything is derived based on law, on just uh, pure reason, like the Vulcans are a really good example. There's no emotion. There's only the direct calculation, and is not a calculation based on narcissism or establishment. It's a reason that's based on truth as much as it can be. So one aspect of logic in how yellow goes about it is that there's this real focus on truth. Um, the yellow really wants to get to the nuts and bolts of what a thing is. They want to deconstruct it, take it apart completely. What is this thing really? How does it work? Um, that kind of thing. And that leads to the next facet of the thing, which is, or actually, no, there's more I have to say on logic first. So with logic, uh, sorry about that. Still getting used to doing these episodes. And this happens to be a loaded one. Another thing, yellow wants to formalize things. It wants to formalize everything, but in a contrast to orange science, where orange already has preconceived notions about how things work, and it wants to get everything into a concrete set of equations, yellow is much more open about it, and they'll have different ideas that they'll be working with, and what they study won't really depend on who's paying them. It won't depend on, well, ideally, I mean, sometimes the world is more annoying than it should be, but generally speaking, yellow will actually be studying things it wants to be studying because it's genuinely interested in what the result of that thing is. It's not about who gave you the grant to do something. It's not about what university you're in, what does the university want you to believe, what results does the university want you to have. With yellow, it's actually, no, how does the thing actually work? And first of all, can I formalize it into an equation? If so, what is that equation? But also, sometimes you can't do that because reality itself might be more complex. It might not be something that fits an equation. And in that case, how else would you go about it? So it's sort of like that. And it's also about the use of logic to figure out on the very large scale, what's really going on, like with dynamical systems. What are the stable points in the system? What are the points that things tend to converge to? What are the points that everything gets repelled by? What are the points that things tend to orbit around? That is that kind of thing. Um, so now we're moving on to deconstruction. And by deconstruction, what I mean is that one power that people have in yellow, a yellow power, is they can take any concept, and what they do is they deconstruct it. They break it down to its very finest pieces and look at it, and it'll be completely free of any of the cultural stereotypes, any of the cultural programming. Am I really this person? No, what I really am, I'm a collection of cells and different sub-organisms that sort of converged into this body that has this particular form. And I'm not really a human, because a human is just this particular form of this different form of globs of organisms. And I'm not really an individual, because what is an individual? An individual is just like a mind construct. Really, there's no separation between me and the rest of the world. And what is religion? Is religion really this concrete centered thing? No, religion is actually a set of common, it's sort of like the mean average of a lot of common beliefs that people have, that people tend to get centered around. And there's these survival mechanisms that get put around religion. So there's always a hierarchy to it. The people at the very top always have a deep vested interest in the people below them believing a certain way. So they deconstruct things in this way. They take any concept, could be people, could be culture, could be some inanimate object, could be the universe itself, and they break the entire thing down to its deepest nuts and bolts. That's what's called deconstruction. The episode Leo Garay put out about the social matrix, how society is a mass hallucination. That's like the ultimate conspiracy theory, where he deconstructs society itself. Very, very interesting. You probably put a link to it. It's like that. That's what deconstruction means. Um, the next facet is solipsism. So solipsism, what that really means is you get this sort of sense of maybe there's nothing else in the world except me. When you look at something, when you have some particular experience, in that moment, it seems as though there isn't anything else except for you. And it's hard to describe. It's just, you begin to wonder, like, how do I know that the rest of the world exists? How do I know that it's not a hallucination? How do I know? And when you think about it enough, you realize you can't know, that there's no way you can prove that anything except you exists. The only thing that you can know with any certainty is that you are having the particular experience that you are having at that very moment. You can't even prove that there was a time before. You can only ever prove that there is the current moment because that's what you're experiencing. It's that kind of solipsism. That this is for very deep stage yellow. It's hard to describe. Most people probably won't really understand. Um, but anyway, moving on. The next one is large scale. So large scale is that yellow wants to look at things from a high up bird's eye view as much as it can. Not literally, but I mean conceptually. Um, you know, it wants to be removed from everything as unbiased as possible so that it can look at things as deeply as possible. In thousands of years, where is society going? Uh, when you look at this large enough system, stars, planets, galaxies, how does all of that behave? Where is all of that going? Where's it going billions of years from now? Where was it billions of years before now? Yellow always wants as cosmic a picture of things as it can possibly find. The next facet is integration. So integration just is the idea that all stages have usefulness, all stages are practical. There's a sense in which you need all of them. Uh, every stage has its own specific function. They're like tools. Yellow goes about the stages like a handyman. I'll need some red for this, and some blue for this, and some green for this, and some purple for this. They're like the engineer of consciousness. That's how they go about it. And they always want to integrate as much as possible so that they have as many tools to work with as possible. So that includes purple and it includes beige because there's some interesting stuff with beige, as I talked about in my beige episode. Um, so the next facet is multi-perspectival, and of course that just means there's multiple perspectives. Every ideology is really just a perspective, including that of stage yellow. Yellow acknowledges that it itself is also a perspective. And that's really important because that's something that stages below it won't do. Stages below it are absolutely certain that their stage is the only true one, whereas yellow is aware that yellow itself is also just a phase, and that eventually people graduate from yellow and they go into stage turquoise. So the final facet is consciousness-based improvement. So that just means yellow is aware, because it's a phase, that means there are things that are above yellow. There's turquoise, and in theory, there's other stuff called coral and teal. I will not be doing it. Let's see. I I will be taking a hiatus from spiral dynamics, and I'm going to stop at yellow because that's where I am. But I will be coming back later to do turquoise and also to cover the very little that I do know about coral and teal. But that's going to be a bit down the road because there's other things that I'm going to be doing first, just other stuff I want to do besides spiral dynamics. There for a while there will not be a turquoise episode, but eventually, like in a few months, I will put one out. So just try to keep that in mind. But anyway, back on yellow. Yellow is always wanting to improve itself. It wants to become more knowledgeable, wants to become smarter, wants to become more conscious, and eventually it develops an interest in other things in the spiritual domain. So it starts looking at what's called waking up, which is, it's hard to describe, but it's sort of, it has to do with, for now I'll just say it has to do with things related to the spiritual. It's too much to go into right now, and um, I'm not really sure how to explain it anyway, and most people wouldn't know what I'm talking about, so I'll just say things concerning the spiritual. Anyway, those are the aspects of yellow. So, Um, how does yellow sustain itself? Well, yellow, when it wants to build a society, the way that yellow goes about it is it has a deep understanding of how all the stages work. And so it's going to have roles for everything beneath it. And what that means, um, uh, so basically, it's like a question of roles. It knows that every stage has an efficacy and it's going to find roles for it. So, for example, people in stage red would be in the military. They're warriors, they're fighters. They're people who are going to protect whatever it is they believe. The people that they believe they're protecting. Um, Stage blue would be law people. So there'd be law people who are enforcers, people who try to keep order, people who are faith based. Those would be the roles. And of course they'd have similar roles for the rest of the stages, just based on their own nature. And it would be designed in such a way that generally there's a progression. People will work their way up, and there wouldn't be any rush. Like, people would be able to spend as much time in any given stage as they need, because ideally everyone should spend at least a few years in one stage so that they can integrate it properly before they move on to the next one. Um, you don't want to jump over a stage because otherwise you'll miss things. It's sort of like having to repeat a grade in elementary school. If you try to bust through things too quickly, you'll have to go back because you won't have learned enough. It's like that. And it'll be set up, it'll be like a mobile hierarchy, where people are, based on how conscious they are, that's how far up they'll be. And it won't be a hierarchy in the sense of, um, like there's no one who will be considered less. It's more like, people in the lower stages are looked upon sort of like children. I mean, that's really how I see them. They're sort of like children. It's hard to be directly angry at people in stage red, um, for the things that they get wrong, just because they're sort of like the bully in school. They're sort of like children. You don't, um, the proper way of handling dysfunctional children. You don't kill them. You don't try to exterminate them. You just try to uh, make them learn from their mistakes and show them what they're doing and try to get them to evolve beyond where they are. It's like that. Um, so, like, it's a hierarchy that's sort of based on maturity, and it's the everyone will attain some stage eventually. So, there's no set rules. No one will ever be locked in to any particular stage. It's sort of like it's a gentle hierarchy, I suppose you could say that, a benevolent hierarchy that's oriented toward the development of everyone within it. And it's a very complete kind of society because everyone in it will be served and everyone in it will have roles. There will be no homeless. If someone's homeless, then that means there'll be like a beige school or a purple school, that person would be put in so that their mental health can be addressed. And then after that, they would move on to the higher stuff. Eventually, they'd graduate to red so that they can learn initiative. And after that, they go into blue so they can learn restraint and so on and so forth. Um, so that's how a yellow society would function and how it would sustain itself. Uh, so there aren't any examples that I have to go on. There are no yellow civilizations in the world right now. The closest to it are some of the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. However, even in those cases, they still are overwhelmingly green. They only have a little bit of yellow, not too much green. I'm sorry, they only have um, that they don't have too much yellow. They have a lot of green. That's what I meant to say. Overwhelmingly green. I don't know. I keep stumbling over myself so much this morning. I've been doing this for almost an hour. That could be why. Anyway, those are the closest analogs. The Nordic countries. They the, they're budding with yellow. You could say that they're it's possible that in the coming decades they will undergo what's called a meme shift and they will move up to the second tier. But I don't know if that would really happen anytime soon. And given how unstable the world is, it's likely that they will do some hunkering down still in stage green, just kind of wait out the world's chaos before they move up to yellow. But they're like the closest. They're starting to explore with the world. They're starting to look at it and figure out how the world works. So like yellow and the second tier in general is genuinely high. Yellow is a genuinely high stage. It's very difficult for people in the modern world to reach. Only about 1% of the global population is in stage yellow or above. 1 in 100 people. So that's why there aren't any examples. And turquoise is even more rare. For turquoise, it's like 1 in 1,000 people. So that's why the examples part of this is going to be very short. So moving on, constructive, destructive. So the constructive aspects of yellow are, of course, a great many. It can look at reality and experience reality for what it is. It can make the world functional and livable. It can give everyone a stable role. It's the source of profound insights, personal fulfillment. Just like it's hard to find things wrong with it, but of course, there are a few. These are of course criticisms from the stage above it, stage turquoise, in that yellow. It has a tendency of getting locked in the physical world. It has a tendency of sort of being lazy about the spiritual, not making attempts to acknowledge that there might be spiritual aspects to reality. It has a tendency to get locked in conceptual models and not see outside of them. In other words, it has a tendency to confuse the map with the territory, not understand that the territory is the territory, it's not the model. The universe is what it is. It's not the model of the universe. It's the real universe. That's a trap that yellow can sometimes fall in. And how it graduates to the next stage is eventually yellow realizes that it can't know everything. That there's only so much that you can know. And eventually they realize that you just kind of have to experience reality. But there's a lot of reality that is just beyond your attempt to model it. It's beyond your attempt to make systems out of it. It's beyond your attempt to conceptualize it. There's no formalism for all of existence. It just is. So that's something that gets them to move up to stage turquoise. And also, yellow has an individualistic focus. All the stuff that it engineers itself toward and sets up its societies around are about people as individuals and getting the individuals as high as they can, seeing everything as the individual, whereas turquoise is holistic. Turquoise looks at everything as the whole. Everything is what's called a holon in turquoise. You're not an individual and you're not a community either. You're both a part and a whole at the same time. And that's an insight from turquoise that yellow eventually realizes, that gets yellow to move up to the next stage. So yeah, that's yellow. It's quite a stage, and eventually I'll be doing the same for turquoise as well, but that's going to be a while because I want to move on to other things, and also I'm not actually in turquoise yet myself, so it might be good to wait a bit, since I when it comes to stuff like turquoise, I don't want to be talking out of my ass. I want to actually know what I'm talking about. So that's it for now.